I'm Rachel Lawson, 34, and the last family dinner I attended will stay with me forever. It was supposed to be the start of something familiar, something warm. Instead, it was the night my entire life changed. I had walked into the Willow Table, a cozy little spot in Portland, where my family always gathered, believing the reunion would bring us back together. I was excited. I brought a bottle of red wine, picked out a thoughtful gift for the kids, and even took the next day off to enjoy the family time. But the moment I spoke about it, the truth came crashing down. My sister Vanessa smirked and told me, "You're not invited." Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been blindsided by your own family. Growing up, I was always the dependable one, the quiet one who did what was expected, helping without asking for anything in return. My parents valued responsibility, hard work, and keeping a low profile. I was the oldest of two girls, always trying to prove I could live up to their standards. Vanessa, my younger sister, was their golden child. She had this effortless charm, the kind that made people gravitate toward her. I, on the other hand, was content to stay in the background, managing my own life with steady hands. I thought that if I just kept helping, kept being reliable, they'd see me. They'd finally recognize my worth. But that never happened. As time went on, I became the invisible one. I worked hard to support my family when my parents hit rough patches. There was the time they needed money for a new car. No questions asked. I sent them what I could. Then there was the house in Beaverton about to be foreclosed. Again, it was me they turned to. I never expected gratitude, just the quiet acknowledgement that I was doing my part as a daughter. Instead, I was treated like a background fixture, always there but never truly seen. Vanessa was different. She was the one my parents adored and held up as their success story. When things went wrong, it was always my responsibility to fix them. Yet whenever the conversation turned to Vanessa, my mother would glow with pride. "She's so talented, so loved by everyone," they'd say. I smiled through it, pretending it didn't sting, but deep down, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't even meant to be a part of their world. Maybe I was just the one who cleaned up the messes, the one who fixed things without ever being noticed. It was during the pandemic when everything truly cracked. My mother was rushed to the hospital with a serious heart condition. While Vanessa was off filming a charity vlog in California, I was the one handling the insurance paperwork, dealing with the doctors and paying the bills. There were nights I didn't sleep, balancing the weight of her recovery with my remote work. I barely ate, surviving on instant coffee and the exhaustion of knowing that I was the only one carrying the load. After her recovery, my mother thanked me, her words full of emotion. But when she posted about it on Facebook, she credited Vanessa for saving her. I was devastated, but I kept going. I didn't want anyone to know how much it hurt. It became easier to stay silent. I kept sending money, kept handling things, and kept my feelings to myself. Because that's what I had always done, quietly put everyone else first. Until that night at the Willow Table. Until the moment I was told I wasn't invited to my own family reunion. It wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the realization that I had been a silent contributor in a family that had never truly seen me. For years, I'd been helping, giving, and staying in the background, hoping one day they'd understand. But it had never worked. That night, I finally understood I had been invisible for too long. And if I wanted anything to change, it would have to come from me. And so as I walked out of that restaurant, the cool Portland air hitting my face, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was awake. I sat in my car staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and for the first time, I didn't see myself through their eyes. I saw me. Just me. What happened next, though, would change everything. I hadn't yet fully understood what the truth of my family's betrayal would mean. I hadn't realized just how deep the lies went. But I was about to find out. After that night at the Willow Table, I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't cry, didn't scream. It wasn't until I sat in my car, the engine idling, the rain tapping softly against the windows, that I felt the weight of everything settle in. My family had always been a source of pride for me, or so I thought. The illusion was shattered in an instant. For so long I had believed that if I just kept giving, just kept supporting them, one day they would finally see me for who I was, not just as the reliable one, the one who fixed everything. I thought they would realize that I mattered just as much as Vanessa. But the truth was right in front of me. I wasn't even invited to my own family reunion. The road home felt longer than usual that night. The streets of Portland, wet and glistening under the streetlights, seemed so far away, and I found myself wondering if I had been blind to what was right in front of me all these years. The voices of my parents and Vanessa, their laughter still ringing in my ears, felt like distant echoes as I drove. For years I had let their indifference and manipulation shape my life. I had paid for their mistakes, covered their debts, and yet I was never enough. I parked in my apartment's lot, sitting still for a moment before stepping out. The rain had started to fall heavier now, but it was almost soothing, as though it was washing away the dust of old memories. My head felt clearer than it had in a long time. The quiet that had settled over me wasn't sorrow or regret. It was something else, something stronger. I was done. I wasn't going to play the role of the good daughter anymore. The next morning I woke early, though sleep hadn't come easily. I made coffee sitting by the window as the sun crept over the horizon, painting the sky a soft shade of pink. But there was a heaviness in the air, a sense that everything I thought I knew had come undone. I thought about the past, how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed. It wasn't just money. It was years of my life spent trying to fix a family that was broken beyond repair. I had always been the one to step in. I was the one who sent the money when their house was nearly taken by the bank, the one who put a roof over their heads when things got too tight. When my father needed help with car repairs or the mortgage, I was the one he called. Never once did they stop to ask how I was doing if I needed anything. They simply took. And I gave because I thought it was the right thing to do. But now I could see the pattern. It was never about family. It was about control. I thought about the moments I had tried to get their attention, to show them that I was more than just the person who fixed things. The countless nights I stayed up balancing my job, my responsibilities, and their demands. I remember when my mother was in the hospital, and I was the one who signed all the forms, the one who took care of the bills, the one who dealt with the insurance. Vanessa was too busy with her vlog to care, and yet when everything was over, my mother posted a picture on Facebook thanking Vanessa for saving her. My heart tightened as I read the words, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that even when I gave everything, they never saw me. Not really. They saw a tool, a resource to get what they wanted. And in that moment, I knew I could no longer live in that shadow. I spent the day at my desk, the hum of my laptop filling the silence in my apartment. But nothing felt quiet anymore. Every memory of my parents' disregard every time they used me without thought echoed in my mind. I was done. I had given enough, and I wasn't going to give anymore. That night, I took the last step. I opened my online banking app, staring at the balance in the family emergency fund, over $42,000. It had started as a safety net, something I created years ago to make sure that if anything happened, I wouldn't have to watch my family struggle. But it wasn't a safety net anymore. It was a trap. I had poured my savings into that account month after month, believing I was helping them. But now I saw it for what it was, a tool for them to use me. With trembling hands, I transferred the entire balance into my personal account. Every dollar. It wasn't just money. It was everything I had been holding on to for so long. The illusion that my family cared about me, that they valued me in some way. I locked the account, changed the passwords, and set up biometric authentication. No more easy access. They couldn't take from me anymore. I felt the finality of it as I hit the transfer button. There was no joy, no relief, just a cold, empty quiet. I didn't tell them. I didn't even feel the need to. A few minutes later, I sent my father a message. Payment denied. Must be that family-only policy. I didn't expect him to understand. I didn't expect an apology. The phone rang almost immediately, 3 times, but I didn't pick up. I knew what was coming. The anger, the accusations. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I let the phone ring until it stopped. Then I sat still. The sound of the rain against the windows was the only thing I could hear now. A few minutes later, my father called again. I didn't answer. I knew exactly what he would say. You've gone too far, but I didn't care anymore. I had done enough. I had carried them for years, and now I was done. When I woke the next morning, I thought I would feel something: guilt, regret, maybe even relief. But all I felt was quiet, and it wasn't the kind of silence I had known before. It wasn't the silence of being ignored or overlooked. It was a quiet that felt like freedom. The knock on the door that night was the first sign that my family wouldn't let go so easily. I heard it before I even looked at the clock. The sound of sharp knocks followed by heavy pounding echoed through the hallway. I knew it was them. I knew they were coming to confront me, and as I walked to the door, I wasn't sure what would happen next. But I was ready. The time for running was over. The knock on the door was sharp, insistent, louder than it should have been for such a quiet night. It rattled through the walls of my apartment, slicing through the calm that had settled over me since I made my decision. I stood there for a moment, listening to the heavy, unrelenting sound. My heart didn't race like it once might have. Instead, it felt steady, empty almost, but steady. I knew who it was: my father, my mother, and Vanessa. I could hear the distinct sound of their voices as they whispered just loud enough for me to catch the words. "Is she home?" My father's voice was strained, almost pleading. "She has to let us in. We have to talk." I hadn't been expecting them to show up so soon. The transfer had only happened hours before, and I had already made up my mind about how things were going to go. But still, part of me felt a flicker of apprehension, the familiar sense that this confrontation would be different from the others. My fingers tightened around the door handle as I took a deep breath. I walked over to the door slowly, deliberately feeling the weight of what was about to unfold. I wasn't sure what I was going to say yet, but I knew it had to be said. This wasn't just about money. It was about finally putting a stop to the cycle that had kept me bound to them all these years. I opened the door just a crack enough for me to see their faces. My father's flushed face, his anger barely contained. My mother's wide eyes filled with worry, and something else, guilt maybe. And then there was Vanessa, her phone up and recording as usual. "Rachel, open this door!" My father growled, his hand coming up to push against the door. "You can't just walk away from your family like this." I stared at him for a long moment, my mind sharp and clear. "What do you want?" I asked quietly. My voice didn't shake. I didn't let it. "We need to talk," he said, his words heavy with authority. "You've gone too far this time. You're embarrassing us." His eyes flicked to my mother, who stood behind him, biting her lip. I could see the subtle shift in her. She wasn't angry. She was trying to make everything look normal, like always. "No," I said softly, my gaze locking on his. "I think it's you who's gone too far. I'm done." My father took a step back, his fists clenching at his sides. "What are you talking about?" "You're not going to get another cent from me," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. That account was never meant to be a well you could keep dipping into. It was supposed to be a safety net. I could see the moment the realization hit him. The air between us thickened, and for a second he didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched on until Vanessa spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mom's right," she said, the phone still in her hand, her tone more playful than it should have been. "You've got no right to cut us off like that. You can't just take everything and leave us with nothing." I didn't respond to her. I turned to face my mother instead, her hands clasped together, her eyes full of emotion I didn't want to decipher. "Is that true?" I asked, my voice softer this time. "Did you really think it was okay to take money from me and not even tell me?" She hesitated, her eyes shifting away from mine. We didn't want to bother you," she murmured, almost like she was ashamed. But there was something off in the way she said it. She wasn't really sorry. She wasn't sorry for what they had done. She was sorry she got caught. I said, trying to hold on to the calm I had found in myself. "But that's not the problem, is it? The problem is you never saw me. You never saw what I was doing for you." At that moment, my father snapped. "Don't act like you're the victim here. You think we owe you something. We raised you. We gave you everything." His voice rose, but it wasn't the same commanding tone I had grown up with. There was something else there now, something almost desperate. "You gave me what I asked." My voice cold now. "A house that always felt like it wasn't mine, an upbringing where I was invisible unless you needed something from me." His eyes widened, and for a second, I saw the man he really was. Not the one I had tried to please, not the father I had spent so long trying to earn approval from, but the person who had never cared enough to see the damage he had caused. Dad Vanessa interrupted, holding up her phone again. "Don't make a scene." Her voice was sharp, more for the camera than for him. She had always been so concerned about appearances. But this time, I wasn't worried about the camera or her followers or the image they were trying to protect. "You don't get to dictate my life anymore," I said firmly. "I'm not the same person I used to be. You can't keep using me and pretending like it's love." The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked like he might speak again, but then he stopped looking at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about his approval. I closed the door just enough to make it clear the conversation was over. I could hear them muttering on the other side, but I didn't open it again. It was done. But I knew this wasn't over yet. They weren't going to just walk away. They'd come back just like they always did, trying to pull me back into their web. But this time, I was ready. I had already taken the first step toward freeing myself from the role I had played in their story for so long. As I stood in front of the door, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had finally chosen myself. The phone vibrated on the table, but I didn't pick it up. The messages would come, I knew that. But they didn't matter anymore. I had made the choice to stop. And no matter what they did, I wasn't going to let them pull me back in. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for tonight, I finally had peace. The morning after the confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling of something settling inside me. It wasn't relief exactly, but it wasn't guilt either. It was like I had stepped into a new space, one that I hadn't even realized I'd been trying to find for years. I didn't answer any of the calls. I didn't check the messages. I just let the silence sit there like a thick fog that needed time to clear. I spent most of the morning in front of my computer trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to the night before. The look in my father's eyes, rage mixed with disbelief, was still fresh. The sound of his fist hitting the door, the way it echoed through my apartment, made me realize how long I'd been living under the assumption that I was still part of something that had already fractured beyond repair. Vanessa's voice had been the hardest to ignore. It always had been. The way she wielded her power over the situation with that camera of hers, turning everything into a spectacle for her followers, made me sick. But it wasn't just her. It was my whole family. Their indifference, their ability to take and somehow never see the damage they were doing, like it was all part of the deal. By midday, I couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. I grabbed my jacket, a scarf, and headed out the door, hoping the walk would clear my head. It was a crisp autumn day in Portland, the kind where the air feels fresh but also sharp against your skin. I walked aimlessly, letting my feet lead me through the streets. I didn't want to go home yet, didn't want to be alone with my thoughts too soon. That's when I saw him, Walter, my grandfather. He had just stepped out of his car, and I caught a glimpse of him before he noticed me. It was like fate had decided I needed to see him right then. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Since my mother had cut off contact with him years ago, I'd only seen him a handful of times. But there he was, walking slowly toward me, a familiar, steady presence. "Rachel," he called, his voice low but warm. "I thought I'd find you here." I stopped in my tracks, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to run. I didn't know if I was ready for another conversation about family, about the mess I was tangled up in, but his eyes were kind, and there was something comforting about the way he stood there, as if he already knew exactly what I needed to hear. "Grandpa?" I said, finally finding my voice. "What are you doing here? I've been trying to find a way to talk to you," he said, his face lined with the years but still strong. "But I think we need to have a real conversation, don't you?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't even realize how much I needed him until that moment. He motioned toward a bench nearby, and we both sat down, the cool air wrapping around us as we settled into the quiet. "I've been watching what's been happening with you and your parents," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "And I've seen enough to know that you've been carrying a heavy load. Your mother and father, they've always been good at asking for help, but never at giving it in return. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. I thought I was doing the right thing. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought if I just kept helping, kept being there for them, things would get better. But they never saw me. They never saw what I was doing for them. Walter looked down for a moment, then back at me. I know, he said, his voice gentle. And I know they've made you believe that you owe them, that it's your responsibility to carry their burdens. But that's not true. No one should ever make you feel like you don't matter unless you're useful to them. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth to my parents, trying to get them to see me for who I was, not just as the reliable one, the one who took care of everything. But in that moment with Walter sitting beside me, it was like the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I don't know what to do now. I admitted, the weight of it all finally crashing down. They're going to come for me again. I know they will. They always do. And I don't know how to say no to them anymore. Walter placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch surprisingly firm for someone so old. You don't have to figure it all out today, but you have to start by telling them the truth. You've been living a lie for too long. You don't owe them anything, Rachel. And if they can't understand that it's time to let them go. His words were like a lifeline thrown to me in the middle of a storm. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone truly saw me. And more than that, someone was telling me it was okay to put myself first. Grandpa, I don't think I've ever really lived for myself before, I said, my voice shaking. I've spent my whole life trying to make them happy, trying to fix everything. But I don't even know who I am anymore. He smiled softly, his eyes kind. I know. And I think you're finally ready to find out. We sat there for a while, not speaking, just letting the quiet between us settle in. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt safe, like a space where I could finally breathe. Eventually, Walter stood up, his joints creaking as he rose. I have a few things to take care of, but I want you to remember this, Rachel. You don't have to carry their burden anymore. It's not your job. You've done enough. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest. I wasn't alone in this. I had someone on my side who understood. Thank you, I said, my voice steady now. Walter smiled at me. I'm always here, Rachel. You're not alone. As he walked away, I stood there for a moment, just watching him go. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. There was a sense of calm now, a quiet peace that I hadn't known I needed until it was here. I knew what I had to do now. I couldn't go back to being the person I had been. I couldn't keep giving to a family that didn't value me. Tomorrow would be the start of something new. But for now, I was going to sit with this moment. This quiet, this space where I could finally hear myself think. The next few days passed in a strange, almost dreamlike haze. I found myself moving through the motions of everyday life, but nothing felt the same anymore. Every task, every conversation felt distant, like I was standing outside my own life, watching it unfold from a distance. I knew I had made the right choice, but still there was a lingering sense of unease. The silence between me and my family was heavier now, like a wall that no one knew how to break. It didn't take long for the phone calls to start. They came in waves, at first my father, then my mother, followed by Vanessa, though she always waited until they had tried to get through to me first. I didn't answer any of them. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I knew what the conversation would be like. They weren't calling to apologize. They weren't calling to understand. They were calling to fix things, to put everything back in its place as though nothing had happened. Each voicemail I listened to felt like a slap. My father's voice, cold and demanding, left the usual message about how this was all a misunderstanding and how in time we'd work things out. My mother's voice was softer but no less manipulative. You know we didn't mean to hurt you, Rachel. You've always been the one we could count on. Her words sounded like she was talking to someone else, someone who would hear her out, someone who would forgive. Vanessa's messages were more of the same, but with an edge of mockery, a coldness I hadn't heard before. It was like they were all expecting me to give in, to back down, as if I were still the same old, reliable Rachel who always put them first. But I wasn't. The hardest part was hearing their voices and not feeling that old pull, that deep desire to make everything okay again. For so many years, I had bent myself into shapes I wasn't even sure existed, just to make them happy, to get their approval, to feel like I belonged somewhere. But now I knew that wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. A week passed before they showed up at my door. I wasn't surprised. I knew it would come to this. The relentless pursuit to get me to relent, to fall back into my old role. I heard the knock at 9 p.m., just as I was about to settle in with a cup of tea and my favorite book. The sound was sharp, forceful, the kind of knock that demanded attention. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't hesitate. I knew who it was. I had known since the moment I heard the first knock. When I opened the door, there they were, my mother, my father, and Vanessa, standing there like they were ready to pick up right where we had left off. Vanessa, as always, was holding her phone, recording, no doubt, for some family drama post she'd used to rally her followers. "Rachel," my father said, his voice low, yet hard. "We need to talk. Now." His eyes were narrowed, filled with the same intensity that had always been present whenever he wanted to control the situation. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about," I replied, standing firm in the doorway. "You've made a mistake," he snapped, stepping forward like he was about to push past me. But I didn't move. I didn't let him. "You're the one who's been making mistakes for years," I said, my voice steady even. "Not just now, but for as long as I can remember." Vanessa let out a small laugh from behind my father, as if this was all just some kind of game. "Oh, this is rich. Really? Rachel, you think you're the only one who's been hurt? You're just upset because you didn't get your way." I glanced at her, and for the first time I saw her for what she really was, a part of the system that had never seen me, never cared. "I'm not upset because I didn't get my way," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "I'm upset because you've been using me for so long and I'm done with it." My mother's voice interrupted before my father could respond. "Don't do this, Rachel," she said, her tone shaky but still full of the same manipulative edge I had come to expect. "You've always been the one to fix everything, to make things right. Don't you want to make this right again?" I stood there feeling something shift inside me. The old Rachel would have stepped aside, would have let them in, and tried to fix things just like I had for so many years. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was done with fixing things that weren't mine to fix. "No, Mom," I said, my voice softer now, but firm. "I'm not fixing this. Not for you, not for anyone. I've spent my entire life trying to make you proud, trying to fit into a role that wasn't mine. And now I'm finally seeing things for what they are. This isn't family." My father took a step forward, his face reddening with anger. "You think you can just walk away from everything we've done for you?" "I don't think I can," I said quietly. "I know I can." The silence that followed was thick, heavy. My parents stood there, their eyes wide, not sure how to handle my refusal. Vanessa, still recording, stared at me, her face unreadable. But then something happened, something I didn't expect. Vanessa lowered her phone, her eyes not mocking, but searching. "Is this really what you want?" she asked, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "You're really willing to just leave everything behind?" I met her gaze, and for the first time I didn't see her as the enemy. I saw her as someone just as lost as I had been. "Vanessa," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I'm not leaving. I'm just leaving them behind, and I'm finally going to live for myself." Her eyes flickered with something like recognition, and for a moment I thought she might say something else. But instead she just turned and walked away, leaving my parents standing there. I didn't feel the rush of triumph that I thought I would. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about finally choosing myself. The door shut quietly behind them, and I stood there listening to the sound of their footsteps fading into the night. The weight of it all hadn't fully settled yet, but it was beginning to. And as I stood there looking out the window at the dark streets of Portland, I knew one thing for sure: tomorrow would be the start of something new, something for me. And no matter what came next, I was ready. The days after my confrontation with my family were strangely quiet. I kept expecting to feel a rush of relief or a sense of freedom, but instead I felt unsettled, like something was still missing. It wasn't that I regretted what I had done, far from it, but the silence that followed felt unnatural. My phone stayed quiet except for a few notifications that I ignored, and the house felt too still. The space that had once been filled with my family's constant demands and expectations now seemed too empty. I spent my time trying to focus on work, but the weight of what I'd just done kept creeping back into my mind. Every task felt harder than it should have, as if my thoughts kept pulling me away. I knew my family would come for me again. They couldn't just let things go. But the thought of them made me realize how deeply I had been intertwined in their drama, how much of my energy had been given to something that would never change. It was a week later when the first sign of movement came not from my parents, but from Vanessa. The message popped up late one evening while I was reading in bed. It was a short text, just a few words, but it hit me like a cold breeze. "I know what you're doing. You really think you can just walk away?" I stared at the screen for a while, trying to figure out how to respond. What did she think I was doing? What did she want me to do? Apologize for choosing myself? I had been the one who always cleaned up her messes, always made sure everything looked perfect to the outside world. And yet here she was questioning me as if I were the one doing something wrong. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I set the phone down and took a deep breath. I didn't need to explain myself to her. I didn't owe her anything. But somehow knowing she had reached out made everything feel just a little more real. She hadn't been the one who showed up at my door. She hadn't been the one to call or leave voicemails. But her message made me realize that the people who had always taken from me weren't done yet. The next day I decided to go to the park to clear my head. The fall air in Portland had a crispness to it, and I wrapped my scarf tightly around my neck as I walked along the trail. There were fewer people out than usual, which was exactly what I needed. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to think about anything other than putting one foot in front of the other and letting the weight of my decisions sink in. I walked for over an hour, my thoughts drifting from memory to memory until something unexpected happened. I saw Walter sitting on a bench near the edge of the park. I had almost passed by when I realized it was him. He was bundled up in his coat, sitting with a notebook on his lap, but he looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Rachel," he said with a smile, his voice warm, "I was hoping I'd see you." I stopped and smiled back, feeling a rush of gratitude that he was there. He had always been a steady presence in my life, even when everything else felt out of control. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said, walking over and sitting beside him on the bench. "I thought you might need some space," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, but I also knew you'd be thinking. And sometimes thinking is better done with someone who knows what it feels like. I nodded a little, surprised by his words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I admitted, looking down at my hands. "And honestly, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I feel like I've finally made a choice for myself, but the silence, it's so loud." Walter looked at me with understanding. "The silence is a hard thing," he said softly, "but sometimes it's the only thing that makes the truth clear. You've done what you needed to do, Rachel, and now you'll need to trust that what comes next is your choice too." I thought about that for a moment. It was the first time I had heard someone validate the uncertainty I felt. Everyone else in my life had wanted me to make things right, to fix the broken pieces of our family. But Walter, in his quiet wisdom, was telling me that what I was feeling, this discomfort, was a part of the process. I sat with him for a while longer, just watching the world go by. The leaves had already started to turn, and the sun was beginning to dip low in the sky. There was a certain peace to the way everything was unfolding, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Before I left, Walter placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "And sometimes, strength comes from letting go, not holding on." I smiled at him, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "Thanks, Grandpa. I'm going to try." As I walked away, I realized that the hardest part of all this wasn't the confrontation, the messages, or the silence. It was letting myself believe that I had the right to choose what came next. It was so easy to get lost in what others expected from me, to let my family define who I was. But now, for the first time, I was finally beginning to see myself through my own eyes. The next few days felt like a shift. My family didn't try to contact me again, but the tension in the air remained. I knew they weren't done with me, but I also knew that I wasn't the same person who had walked away from that dinner, sitting alone in the cold parking lot. What came next wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about finding the courage to hold my ground, even when everything inside me wanted to run back to the familiar. but I couldn't. I had come too far. And soon enough, the reality of that decision was going to hit harder than I could ever have imagined. It had been 3 weeks since I made the decision to stop trying to fix my family. 3 weeks since I sent the money back into my own account, cut off their access to the emergency fund, and took my first real step toward building a life for myself. I thought it would feel freeing, like a weight had been lifted, but instead it felt like I was treading water. The silence from my parents was unnerving. They weren't calling anymore, but I could feel them watching, waiting. I knew they'd be back. The first time I heard my father's voice again, it wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a knock at the door. It came through the hallway outside my apartment in the form of a letter. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable, my father's sharp-pointed script. I stood there for a long time, just holding it in my hands, wondering what it could possibly say. When I finally opened it, the words hit me harder than I expected. "Rachel, we need to talk. Your mother is upset. We need to figure this out. You've broken your place in this family, but I'm still your father. Please reconsider what you've done. We'll be waiting for you." I read it through 3 times before I finally set the paper down, my hands shaking slightly. It wasn't just the message. It was the tone demanding cold, as though they still held some kind of power over me. I was supposed to be the one to apologize, the one to come crawling back to fix what was broken, but I wasn't going to do that anymore. Still, I couldn't help but feel the flicker of doubt. Had I made the right choice? Was I really ready to walk away from everything I had known for so long? The family dinners, the holidays, the moments when I thought they saw me, even if just for a moment. I called Walter the next morning, needing his steady presence. "Rachel, I knew they wouldn't stop," he said when I told him about the letter. "They've spent years using you, and they're not about to let that go. But don't forget why you made this choice. You're not just walking away from them. You're walking towards something better. For yourself." His words helped, even if just for a moment. I couldn't keep second-guessing myself. I had done what I needed to do. I had to keep moving forward, no matter what they tried to pull me back into. 2 days later, I got a call from Vanessa. The tone in her voice was different than the usual snark or coldness. There was something almost desperate about it. "Rachel?" She said, her voice shaky. I know things have been messed up between us, and I'm not going to pretend that I've been perfect because I haven't. But you can't just leave us. You're my sister. You're supposed to be here. Please, just talk to Mom and Dad. Just come back." I was silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Part of me wanted to give in. Part of me wanted to believe that she had changed, that maybe she saw what was really happening. But I knew better. I had seen her manipulate me for too long. She wasn't asking for me. She was asking for what I could give her. "I can't, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not coming back to that. You know that. I can't be what you want me to be anymore. I didn't ask for you to leave," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I don't know what to do without you." For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of pity for her. She had always been the favored one, the one everyone doted on. She had always been the one my parents lifted up, while I was the one who kept things together behind the scenes. "I know," I said softly, "but that's not my responsibility anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, she spoke again. "Okay, I get it, but I don't know how I'm supposed to keep going without you. I don't know who I am anymore without that." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I wasn't going to fix her. I wasn't going to let myself fall back into that role. "I have to go," I said, ending the call before I could second-guess myself. The next few days were a blur. The silence from my family was deafening, but it wasn't enough to push me back. I was starting to find my own rhythm again. I was learning how to be okay without them. I spent my time on projects I had been putting off, things I had never had the space to focus on before. I was getting lost in work, and for the first time, it felt good. Then one evening, after another long day at work, I came home to find a package waiting for me at the door. It wasn't the letter from my father this time, nor a call from Vanessa. It was a small box, wrapped simply with plain brown paper. There was no return address, just my name written in bold letters across the top. I opened it cautiously, not sure what to expect. Inside there was a stack of old family photos, the kind I had seen 1,000 times before. But underneath them, there was something I didn't recognize, a journal. I ran my fingers over the worn leather cover, feeling the weight of it in my hands. As I flipped through the pages, it became clear. The journal was mine. I hadn't seen it in years. It had been tucked away on a shelf at my parents' house, hidden among old books and forgotten mementos. But there it was, filled with memories I hadn't realized I had buried so deep. It was filled with notes from my childhood, little moments of hope, of dreams, and of me trying to make sense of everything that had been happening around me. I sat down on the couch, flipping through the pages, remembering the girl I had been, the one who had always tried to keep everyone together. The one who had thought that if she just kept giving, kept sacrificing, everything would be okay. But now, reading the words I had written, I saw something different. I had never been truly seen, not by them and not by me. I had been holding on to something that wasn't real. This was my turning point. The journal wasn't just a relic from the past. It was proof of how far I had come and how far I had yet to go. And in that moment, I knew that the final step toward freedom wasn't just about cutting ties with my family. It was about learning to see myself. The next day, I made my decision. I was going to take one more step forward, away from the life that had held me captive for so long. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore, and I wasn't going to let their idea of family shape the rest of my life. I had already started the journey, and now I was ready for what came next. A few months had passed since I made the choice to step away from my family. At first, I wasn't sure if the emptiness I felt was real, or just a result of everything I had put in motion. But now, looking back on everything, I can see the shift more clearly. The quiet that had felt so loud when I first cut ties had softened into something more manageable, more peaceful. I had learned that silence wasn't always a sign of failure or abandonment. Sometimes it was just a necessary pause for clarity. My parents, of course, hadn't let things rest for long. My father sent one final letter, more of a demand than anything else. He called it an attempt at reconciliation, but there was no apology, no recognition of what had happened. My mother, too, sent an email offering her usual justification that she was just trying to keep the family together and maybe someday we could all heal. But it was the same message in different forms. I had already read between the lines too many times to believe anything would change now. I didn't reply. And that, I think, was the most liberating choice I could make. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. They had their own way of seeing the world, and I had mine. There was no middle ground where we could meet and make peace, at least not on their terms. Vanessa reached out once, asking to meet. She wanted to talk, she said. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I saw her again, I realized something important. She hadn't changed. She hadn't done the hard work of looking at herself. Not really. She was still trapped in the same cycle, relying on the same excuses. I listened to her, but I wasn't going to fall for it again. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't need to play that role anymore. After a long conversation, I told her the truth that I loved her, but I couldn't be the person who saved her anymore. It was her turn to save herself. It was a quiet, bittersweet conversation, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. But I knew I was right. I couldn't keep doing this dance. I couldn't be the one who gave and gave while they took and took. That night I came home, and for the first time in a long time, I felt okay. I felt like I had made peace with what had to happen. The next few months weren't easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was being too harsh, if I was wrong to cut them off. But in the end, I knew I had done the right thing. I had chosen to live for myself. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I spent more time with friends who had become my chosen family. I threw myself into my work, finding joy in the projects that I had once pushed aside for the sake of keeping everything together. And I finally started doing the things I had always put off. I took up gardening, something I had always wanted to try, but never had time for. I joined a local book club and found solace in the quiet evenings spent with people who simply enjoyed each other's company. It wasn't grand, but it was enough. And then there was Walter. He was always there, a steady presence in my life. We met every week for coffee, talking about everything and nothing. It was in those quiet moments with him that I started to realize just how much he had taught me without ever needing to say much. His wisdom wasn't loud or flashy. It was simple, steady, and kind. And that had been the missing piece in my life all along. One evening, a few weeks before Christmas, I sat down to write out my final thoughts in the journal I'd found earlier that year. As I flipped through the pages, it was like meeting an old version of myself, the girl who had tried to fix everything, who believed that if she just gave enough, she'd finally get the love and recognition she was so desperate for. I closed the journal with a deep breath and smiled softly. That girl wasn't gone, not entirely, but she had found her way finally into a new chapter of life. I never did hear from my parents again, and maybe that was for the best. My mother sent a final email 1 year later apologizing for what had happened, but by then the words didn't carry the same weight. I had let go of the past long before that. The apology wasn't for me, it was for her, and that, I suppose, is where the lesson lies. Sometimes we have to choose our own healing. We can't wait for others to change to see us in the way we need them to. The world won't bend to our expectations, and people don't always learn the lessons we want them to. But we can learn for ourselves. We can choose peace, we can choose joy, and most importantly, we can choose to finally put ourselves first. A few months ago, I visited my grandfather's house in Forest Park again. It had been a while since I'd been there, and walking in felt like a return to something solid, something that had always been steady. I sat down with him just like we used to, sipping tea and talking about everything and nothing. He smiled at me, his eyes filled with a knowing warmth. "You're doing well, Rachel," he said. "You've found your way." And in that moment I realized that he was right. I had. As I left his house that day, I felt something light and freeing in my chest. I wasn't just walking away from my family anymore. I was walking toward my future, toward the life I was creating for myself. And in that quiet, beautiful moment, I knew that I had finally found my place. If you're listening to this, I hope you know that it's never too late to choose yourself, to walk away from what's holding you back, whether it's family fear or the weight of expectations. You deserve the life you want, and sometimes the hardest part is just letting go. Thank you for listening. I hope you find the strength to choose yourself too.